first started coming to TechTO in Toronto 2 years ago, I was doing what I thought the definition of success was. I had gotten an MBA degree, I moved downtown Toronto, had a cool condo, worked full-time in corporate finance, and took home a pretty good paycheck for someone my age. But I didn't wake up every morning excited to go to work. I just kind of rolled my eyes and snoozed my alarm and then eventually went into work. So now I know that how I define success is by being excited to wake up every morning and do what I have to do. Whoops, wrong way. So I'm going to talk about how to move from kind of that day job into your startup and how to kind of know, or at least how I knew it was the right decision. So I took a stock photo of a crossroads because that was where I was at when I was kind of attending TechTO. I worked full-time, made good money, but I was also moonlighting this business on the side. But eventually, I was lucky enough that my business had so much demand that I had to decide, would I work full-time and let the business kind of fail because I wasn't putting all of myself into it, or would I go all in on the business? So since that's where I was when I started going to TechTO, I assume that's maybe where some of you are today. And if you're not, I'll try not to be too dry and try to be quick. But if you are, hopefully I can help you with a couple of tips before kind of taking that leap. So the first thing is to make sure that the business that you're building solves a real problem and isn't just a cool invention or a cool idea or something that you think would be fun to work on. So if you become in love with a problem that you're solving, which is what we've done, you can pivot and change what your business is actually doing without getting stuck. But if you're building something that you think is really cool and you think there will be market acceptance for, but you're just kind of caught up on a product, you might get stuck and wish that you were still working full-time and taking home a paycheck. And also, for me, I'm a little bit risk adverse, so before I jumped in with both feet, I needed to know that there was real traction for my business. And I've seen a lot of students just quit school because they want to work on a startup, or people quit their job because they came up with a cool idea. But for me, I think it's important to prove that you have some real traction. So for me, before I quit my job, I wanted to quit my job because there was so much demand for the business that I was building that I had to invest all my time into it. Not just that I would prefer to be working on it full time. And the next, this one seems obvious, but have a plan to pay your bills when you quit your job. Because you might think like, oh yeah, I've got a forecast, cash flows are gonna come in, but you probably wanna reinvest those cash flows in growing your business, because that's a whole lot better for your equity, which is kind of the advantage of being a startup founder. And you might also think, I'll just go out and raise some investment. But investment does take some time to raise, and most investors won't even look at you if you're not fully committed to your startup. So there is a window of time that you need to be fully committed to your startup, but also somehow paying your bills. For me, that meant that I went and got a waitressing and bartending gig that freed up my time, but paid my bills and let me just scrape by on paying my rent and things like that. But also have a risk threshold. So know before you dive in what you're willing to do. So for me, I was totally willing to go back to tending a bar. Some of you might think that sounds brutal, like no way would I do that. And that's fine, but you might have to think outside of the box. I was willing to do that, but I'm not willing to do that for 15, 20 years and just have a little fun business on the side. I told myself that for the next 3 years, I'll accept just paying my bills. I can put off kind of buying a house with my boyfriend or getting married for 3 years, but I know that that's kind of the runway that I'm working with. And I think if I were just to quit and not have made that decision, I might question every day, is it worth it to just scrape by? For now. And then the other important thing is, while you do have to make sacrifices, or I certainly did, don't give up what's most important for you. So for me, here I was kind of bartending and doing all this, but yet I was paying thousands of dollars a month to keep my 2 horses, which sounds insane. Lots of people would say, just sell your horses and you're set. But it can be kind of mentally daunting to be a founder. And for me, that's what I love. So going and riding my horses, or like watching the sunset on my horse on Sunday, that's what kind of broke the stress for me and said, you know what, waking up tomorrow morning and tackling all these problems at my startup is totally worth it. I could have sold them and had more money and things would be easier for the short time, but it probably wouldn't have been good in the long run. And then finally, just dream about both the good and the bad if you're going to take the leap. So dreaming about the good, how awesome like my life could be if this really takes off and is something huge. That's kind of what keeps me getting up and working on it every morning. But also thinking about what the absolute worst case scenario, if my business were not to have worked out, would be, is what gave me the legs to actually do it. I remember I was kind of talking to my mom on the phone when I was hemming and hawing and saying, you know, like, I think I'm getting so much traction with this business, I might have to quit my job to do it. And I remember she said, well, like, Mallory, what are you gonna do if it doesn't work out? Like, you'll be kind of screwed, right? And I remember so quickly, I just responded, well, I mean, I'll go back to corporate. It's not that big of a deal. So for me, that was kind of a light bulb moment. It's worth it to do this because worst case, I just go back to corporate. I lived on, you know, not a great salary for a little while, but no big deal. And today, I mean, we have a pretty good trajectory now with where our company is at. But if it were to, for some reason, to like absolutely shatter and fail, I'm in a way better position than I was back then. I've met so many amazing people in the startup community. I'm sure I'd have a really cool job at another startup, not just working in finance somewhere. And I also have so much more life experience and a way better resume. So my worst case is actually pretty good. And that's what kind of gave me the confidence to say, yeah, I can kind of quit my job and do this. So those are kind of my 6 tips. I'm Mallory, didn't mention our company. Our company is BridesMade. If you ever want to reach out to me, that's my email, so you can. And thanks for listening.
All right, skill testing questions.
Just for the sake of asking.
So it sounded like you did a lot of planning and, you know, forward thought about how you're going to do this. Was there anything that threw you for a loop and that you were unprepared to handle?
I think I put so much thought into it that I knew I would be okay. So one thing that I was really worried about with the prospect was, can I actually afford my bills? And in my case, keep my horses, like I have a lot of bills. And so I started, while I was still working in corporate finance, I started waitressing to see like, how much money am I actually gonna make in a week? And how many shifts and hours do I have to work to make the tips I need before I go? So that was like a really exhausting period of about a month and a bit. But I was almost shocked by how much money I did make bartending. But I was like, okay, like the job can go now. I'll be fine, yeah.
Cool. So one thing you mentioned is that you have to be comfortable with your idea before you take it to the next level. My question to you is, going back before that, before you started building the website and getting orders and measuring click-through rate, what made you decide that this is an idea that's worth pursuing even with that amount of energy?
Yeah, so my idea kind of stems from, so BridesMaids, we rent size adjustable bridesmaid dresses. That's what we do through e-commerce, so people don't have to go into a store and try them on. And it stemmed from someone telling me it sucks to be a bridesmaid. So first thing was, I know this is kind of a real problem because somebody's complaining about it. And then I started going, I went to a wedding trade show or an expo and started asking people around there, would you rent your bridesmaid dresses? Because that was my initial little solve to this problem, and it's changed and evolved from there. So I started, and I went out and said, would you rent it? And that started to prove out to me because everyone was like, yeah, cool, like I would do that, why not? But I still was feeling a little risk averse. I'm like, people seem to be jumping to the yeah too quickly. So I started asking people, why wouldn't you rent your bridesmaid dresses? Like, what would stop you? And when I started getting the answers to that, all of them, I was like, well, that's an easy fix. We'll build this into the business. Or that's fine, we can build this into the business. So asking those questions and talking to real people kind of told me all the risks that we had with the business before even kind of getting to MVP. So that's what kind of gave me the confidence to jump to the next step. But like, I still didn't quit my job yet at that point. Yeah.
Said awesome. Thank you.